From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. Algerian President Abdelaziz Bouteflika has handed in his resignation after weeks of mass protests calling on him to step down. On Monday, Bouteflika said he would resign before April 28th. In March, the head of the Algerian army called on the 82-year-old to be declared unfit, citing Article 102 of the Constitution. The president has rarely appeared in public since he suffered a stroke 6 years ago. And people are celebrating the president's resignation. Dozens of people carrying the national flag gathered in a central square in capital Algiers after the announcement. But even after Bouteflika announced he would resign, Algerians are now calling on the entire government to leave. People continue urging authorities to let them choose their leaders through fair and free elections. Before turning in his resignation, Bouteflika appointed a 27-member cabinet to rule the country until a new president is chosen.
The resignation of the president does not offer anything to the people. We want things to happen on the ground. The people want something tangible. The people want Article 70 of the Constitution, which states that people are the source of all power.
Colombian activist Deiner Seferino Yunda Camayo has been shot dead by police during a protest. That's according to the National Indigenous Organization of Colombia. Riot police heavily repressed participants of the social minga in the department of Valle del Cauca, also leaving several injured. Witnesses said the activist died right away after he was shot in the chest. Tuesday marks the 24th day of protest by indigenous, campesino, and Afro descendants who demand that the government fulfill agreements regarding their lands and rights. The dialogue between communities and the government was called off yesterday as the protests say the government has not agreed to certain guarantees. But a different dialogue table is set to restart talks in another city. It has been over 3 weeks since the start of the protests by indigenous communities and campesinos. Let's find out more about the Minga Social and its demands.
With just their traditional batons in their hands, these indigenous people in La Delfina in Valle de Cauca have been protesting in defense of life, land and peace. The baton symbolizes their oath to defend their territory and their people. Angered by the presence of the armed forces in the areas inhabited by indigenous people, campesinos and Afro-Colombians, and the constant neglect of their demands, these people decided to put pressure on the government by blocking the Pan-American highway between La Maria and La Augustina in the southwest of Colombia.
It
is worrying that the national government does not show a gesture of willingness to meet with campesinos. And we are concerned about the fact that there might be a stronger confrontation than those we have had these past few days.
Their protests soon spread to 9 departments across Colombia. They call it the Minga, after the traditional collective action of indigenous communities. More than 30,000 people from about 500 organizations have joined this Minga since it was launched on March 10th. The main demand of the protesters is that the government comply with the agreements reached with the indigenous people since 1991 and guaranteed by Article 286 of the Constitution. They want their human rights be protected and their social and economic rights to be guaranteed. They also want the full implementation of the 2016 peace accord signed between the government and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, the FARC. But instead of listening to their rising voices, the government responded with a heavy hand. In the police repression, over a dozen protesters have been injured.
The state always wants to clear their hands, and we know the state is going to manipulate public opinion. If something happens during a demonstration, the state is responsible because we are exercising our rights. The state is to blame if a comrade is killed. We are campesinos. We don't know how to deal with explosives. They cover their attacks against us to stigmatize the indigenous struggle.
The organization of Mingas is not new in the country. Since 1999, the indigenous people and campesinos have been fighting hard for their right to their ancestral land and their social rights. Their demands have fallen on the deaf ears of various governments. In 2006, more than 18,000 indigenous people and peasants protested to reject the free trade agreement with the United States and the re-election of Álvaro Uribe. In 2008, the protests lasted for 2 months and over 5,000 people marched to the capital, Bogota. In 2014, the indigenous people signed agreements with the government of Juan Manuel Santos. But what triggered these recent protests is the rise in the killing of indigenous leaders in Colombia since Iván Duque took the office of president in August 2018. Since then, more than 60 social leaders have been killed in the country. The marchers have been asking Duque to meet them and comply with the agreements reached with the previous governments. So far, no positive step has been taken by the government to correct what the protesters say is the historic neglect of the state.
The recovery of electricity continues in Venezuela. The metro in the capital, Caracas, is up and running as service resumes. The Los Teques metro system also working again, as well as state railways. Work on restoring power throughout the country has been constant since attacks began on the electricity grid. All schools in Venezuela will reopen on Wednesday. President Nicolás Maduro made the announcement on Twitter while asking students to go back to classes and to continue resisting. He also called on the people to let everyone know they will triumph over the difficult situation in the country. Schools across Venezuela had been closed because of the most recent attack on the country's power grid. Throughout Venezuela, contingency plans set up by the government are active to guarantee access to food and water for all citizens. Despite the difficulties following several attacks against the country's services, people continue to resist.
Various designated areas to refuel water tankers are available across Caracas. From early in the morning, regular citizens, along with members of the armed forces, organized to distribute water to various communities. The main goal of this plan is to provide water for all citizens.
We are resisting in our own way. President Maduro, the people of La Cementera are with you. Neither the imperialist lackeys, nor Donald Trump, nor that Guaidó will win. We have a president, and his name is Nicolás.
The terrorist attacks against Venezuela's power grid, orchestrated by the international right wing and which sought to leave the country in the dark for a long time, are confronted with the people's resilience.
Right now, we need to save electricity. We can't waste any more energy. We know water will come. We know this will be fixed. What we must focus on now is on moving forward. That's all we can do.
Women led the resistance in these communities, along with their children. They stand against violence and demand peace.
Yesterday, some people were burning trees. Why are they attacking nature now? We will continue standing here. We will not allow the violent opposition to enter here.
Teamwork and social equality is made more and more visible as foreign intervention continues to intensify. Citizens condemn being victims of a violent opposition that wants to take power by any means necessary.
Mexican authorities have rescued more than 330 Central American migrants who were being transported in buses in the state of Chiapas. 15 people were arrested for alleged human trafficking, Mexican authorities confirmed. The migrants coming from countries such as Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua were giving medical and psychological care. There were 157 minors in the group. 3 people were killed and a number of women were kidnapped in Nyiragongo, a Congolese village in the province of Goma. Now the group is asking for $20,000 for their release. People there say they haven't lived in peace since 1995, and now they are mobilizing, urging for their security and the end of corruption.
These offices were shut down after a protest where people in Nyiragongo are calling for the return of the legitimate Wami Bakumu.
There are politicians and officials who used to belong to the rebels. There are murders, arbitrary detentions, kidnapping. The police, a professional police, is supposed to protect demonstrations, but unfortunately not in our land. We haven't had our native authority for more than 20 years.
We have been here for more than 100 days and we will continue until we have our legitimate Wami 11 Bigaruka Bakumu back.
25 years is too much time. We, Congolese, have agreed on how to live in peace, but we are just not allowed.
In order to respect our rights, our leader has to also be respected. After Wami Kembe, it was Bigaruka. After Bigaruka, Bankugu. And after Bankugu, his son Lebon.
The last Wami was killed in an attack in 1995 perpetrated by the rebels that ruled in North Kivu until 2003 peace agreements. Since then, the area has been ruled by interim bosses that are not recognized by the population.
Here we are not safe at all. If we are not allowed to be ruled by our Wami back, then you are responsible for anything that may happen. We should be allowed to have our Wami back as part of our tradition, because in our culture killing is forbidden, even looking at someone's blood.
Rwanda used to protect the M23 position from its hill. Our territory is politically managed by our neighboring country. It is easy for this country to work, to do politics here and destabilize the territory of the Masisi, Rutshuru, Walikale, and even the whole country.
The Nyiragongo is located between the border with Rwanda and the National Park of Virunga, where armed groups hide, among them the Rwandese FDLR.
Nothing has changed in our lives after the elections. We need our Mwawi so he can put an end to this and protect our development.
People have to sell their little piece of land to survive, all because of the conflict. Each family here has lost at least one relative, or 2 or 3.
The solution has yet to be found.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. Heavy rains have affected more than 30,000 people in Ecuador. According to the National Risk and Emergencies Service, 21 people have died since the rainy season began in October 2018. Due to the heavy rains and floods, more than 7,500 hectares of agricultural lands were destroyed and hundreds of houses were affected.
The flood has destroyed the harvest. We cannot work anymore. We don't have anything to eat. We can only work for 1 or 2 days at most.
I believe we can endure for just a few more days. There is nothing to eat. All the crops are sodden. Animals have drowned. Humans are suffering a lot.
At least 8 men have died after suffocating in an illegal mine in the town of Huamachuco in northern Peru. The miners got stuck in a gold mine after a tunnel they dug began emitting poisonous fumes. One of the miners who survived in the incident said his colleagues became dizzy and suffered headaches in the tunnel. The authorities have not identified the owner of the gold mine and no arrests have been made so far.
We want to see the owner here, and if the owner does not come, we don't know what we are going to do. He has to return. My son has to return.
Indigenous leaders from the Peruvian Amazon arrived in Lima for the March of Sacrifice, demanding that the government of Martín Vizcarra solves the situation that communities are enduring due to constant oil spills.
Indigenous leaders arrived in Lima after a trip of more than 50 hours. They said that this is the only way to let the state know about the situation indigenous communities are going through in the Peruvian region of Loreto.
We are not here on a trip. We are here to let them know that our forests, rivers, and fish are contaminated due to oil spills. We no longer have food. We exist. We are people. We want to be heard, and we want the authorities to give us solutions.
According to the Amazonian leaders, half a century has passed since international companies and the state started exploiting indigenous lands. However, leaders say the communities haven't received any benefit. They added their people are living in poor conditions and that their natural resources are being affected.
Oil is the heart of Peru, which generates economic resources that don't go to our people. We don't receive any help. There are no improvements to education, health, nutrition, and transport. We are out here without light, roads, water, or sewers.
The indigenous delegation was received in Lima by the president of the ministerial cabinet, who committed to create a commission that monitors the situation of the communities and addresses its demands. However, this isn't the first agreement signed by the state with the communities, and the leaders have already lost faith in these methods.
The indigenous federations from each part of Loreto, from other provinces and districts are coming together. If the government doesn't address our demands, we will start a mobilization and an indefinite strike. This is when the state must pay attention to us, because we live in an oil-rich area, and still we are living in poverty.
The indigenous communities of Loreto are asking the state to declare a state of emergency in all the communities of the Amazon basins affected by oil spillages, and that the resources from the oil revenue must be invested in projects of development for their region.
Former Chief Prosecutor Telma Aldana will not be allowed to run for Guatemala's presidential elections. Our correspondent Mario Rosales from Guatemala City explains.
Guatemala's top electoral court has rejected the candidacy of former Chief Prosecutor Telma Aldana for the upcoming presidential elections on June 16th. This comes as the court accepted 3 challenges to her candidacy. After the decision was made, Aldana, member of the Seed Movement Party, took to Twitter to announce that she will appeal the ruling at the highest authority in the country. She is free to appeal the decision. However, she faces 2 major issues. One is that there is not much time until the election, and the second is that she is out of the country since there is a detention order against her. Some analysts say there are very powerful secret groups behind the prevention of her candidacy. It is suspected that this is because during her time as chief prosecutor, she brought corruption charges against many people. Even though she's also accused of corruption, her case will likely go to the Constitutional Court, which will have the final say.
We thank Mario for that report. Relatives of the victims of the Uruguayan dictatorship have supported the president's decision of dismissing the heads of the armed forces. In an official statement, an organization created by relatives of the victims said that they trust the Senate to properly act against those responsible. The defense minister and the head of the armed forces were dismissed after it was discovered they hid information about the murder of a man who was part of the Marxist Tupamaro movement during the dictatorship. 80 years have passed since the end of the Spanish Civil War, which was won by fascist Francisco Franco and began a 40-year dictatorship. Sadly, his bloody legacy is still alive in today's politics.
On April 1st, 1939, Spanish General Francisco Franco's troops had already taken over most of Madrid. It was the last stage of the Civil War. The bloody armed conflict was coming to an end.
La guerra ha terminado.
The Civil War lasted 3 long years. Fascist troops led by Franco overthrew the leftist Second Spanish Republic. Many thought the horrors were over for Spain, but little did they know that they were only beginning under Franco's rule.
He might have put an end to the war, but at the same time, he started a revenge mission because Franco's regime was an immense vengeance that lasted 40 years.
40 years of dictatorship and repression ended in 1975 with Franco's death. But 2 years later, Spain tried to bury its bloody past with the amnesty law. Many still see it as a way of generating impunity, which still goes on today, thanks to far-right politicians.
Because they continue being Franquistas. The party Vox represents the Spanish right wing. That is not like other European right-wing groups, which are anti-fascist. In this country, the right have been governing for 40 years, and even when the transition arrived, they maintained economic and political power.
There is less than a month until the general election, but Franquismo is still alive in Spain, well embedded in the election campaign. The government has been trying to exhume the dictator's body from his mausoleum in the Valle de los Caídos for almost a year now, but the Popular Party has said if they win, they will stop the process.
It is the right that has halted the exhumation process in many cases, and it is the right wing that also halts the process of annulling the amnesty of Francoist criminals. And who benefits from this? The masterminds of these crimes. Let's just say it out loud.
And so, several organizations are calling for a new political transition.
There should be a process, a second transition that breaks this narrative of common consensus on impunity and silence.
And for this transition to come, associations say it is essential that the Franco regime is taught in depth in schools, so that the wounds may finally begin to heal.
Dozens of residents of a town near the Mexican volcano Popocatépetl have participated in a carnival festivity. Performers known as cijanetes dance through the streets of San Nicolás de los Ranchos wearing masks and silver body paint. The tradition began as a way to ask for good crops, but now is aimed to please the volcano spirit. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome again. UK Prime Minister Theresa May has announced her government will seek to further delay Brexit. May will also meet with the opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn in an attempt to break the impasse in Parliament.
I know there are some who are so fed up with delay and endless arguments that they would like to leave with no deal next week. I've always been clear that we could make a success of no deal in the long term, but leaving with a deal is the best solution. So we will need a further extension of Article 50, one that is as short as possible and which ends when we pass a deal. And we need to be clear what such an extension is for, to ensure we leave in a timely and orderly way.
The Iranian government has ordered 70 villages to be evacuated in Khuzestan due to a risk of floods. At least 47 people have died in flash floods in northern and southern Iran over the past 2 weeks, and thousands have been displaced. Floods have affected at least 26 out of Iran's 31 provinces since heavy downpours began in March. The government has since announced a state of emergency. A fire that engulfed around 15 hectares of forest in southwest China's Sichuan province has been contained. Local authorities dispatched more than 600 people to quench the blaze, which broke out around 6 p.m. local time on Saturday at a remote spot. 27 firefighters and 3 locals lost their lives while fighting the fire. The National Meteorological Center forecasts that rains are expected in the region, which is helpful to the rescue efforts.
The fire engulfed around 15 hectares. The fire is not raging anymore. However, it's pretty difficult to put it out as the fire broke out at a place with an elevation difference of 1,600 meters, and the firefighters have to trek over a rugged area at an altitude of nearly 4,000 meters. Some flames are beyond our reach. Thanks to the 5 helicopters deployed by the country's Ministry of Emergency Management, the forest fire has been brought under control. Now, it's hard to see forest fire in the daytime.
The Senegalese President Macky Sall says he would prioritize the environment, women's rights, and youth employment during his second term in office. In his inauguration speech, President Sall promised to take action for the environment as high pollution and rising sea levels have raised concerns. During his first term, Senegal's economy grew more than 6% per year. Oil and gas production from new offshore fields is expected to further boost the economy.
From the depths of our countryside to the confines of our cities, I feel the pulse of our nation and that of our youth. For the sequence that we are opening today, this vibrant and creative youth that incarnates hope and the vital force of the nation will remain at the forefront of my priorities.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.